Have you ever found yourself pausing, maybe late at night, just pondering the really big questions?
The grandest ones, yeah.
Huh. Why is there something rather than nothing at all? Or can we actually know if a divine being exists, not just, believe it?
Right, beyond just faith.
Exactly. So today we're embarking on a deep dive into this, well, fascinating stack of sources, philosophy, theology, spanning centuries of thought.
And our mission really is to pull out the core arguments, the most important insights from these, frankly, incredible minds.
Mm.
We want to help you navigate these complex ideas,
We're talking thinkers like Anselm Aquinas, way back.
all the way up to modern logicians, people like Plantinga, even Gödel touches on this stuff.
Mhm.
It's about getting you informed quickly, but hopefully engagingly too.
Because these are profound topics humanity has wrestled with forever, you should definitely expect some mind-bending puzzles and maybe some surprising turns as we unpack what these really sharp minds have said.
Trying to find ultimate meaning through reason itself, it's quite a quest.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where do you even begin trying to reason your way to God's existence? Our sources show philosophers often start with just pure thought.
Yeah, attempting to reason God into existence, basically.
Which brings us straight to the ontological argument. Pretty audacious stuff.
It really is. What's so fascinating is how it tries to prove God's existence purely from the concept of God. You don't need to, look at the world.
Just the definition of
Exactly. Anselm's famous version posits a being than which nothing greater can be thought.
Okay.
The core idea is this. If you can conceive of such a being, right, the greatest possible thing,
Yeah.
but if that being only existed in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
then you could actually conceive of something greater, namely a being just like it, but one that also exists in reality.
Because existing is greater than not existing.
Precisely. But that contradicts the initial definition of God as the greatest conceivable being. So Anselm argues this greatest conceivable being must exist in reality. Descartes had a similar thought, arguing existence is part of the very essence of a perfect being, like three sides are essential to a triangle.
Okay. Okay, I follow the logic. But this feels a bit like a philosophical sleight of hand, doesn't it? Here's where the pushback comes in, right?
Oh, big time. Critics like Immanuel Kant jump in here. He argues that existence isn't a real predicate.
A real predicate. What does that actually mean in plain terms?
It means saying something exists doesn't add anything to the concept of that thing. Like if I describe a frog as green, green tells you something about the frog itself.
Right. A property.
But if I say a frog exists, the word exists doesn't describe the frog more fully. It just tells you about its status, that it's actually out there in the world.
So you can't just define something into existence by building existence into the definition.
That's Kant's point. He thought you can't just say the greatest conceivable being must exist because existence isn't a quality like greatest or powerful. It's just whether it is or isn't. Defining a perfect island doesn't make it real.
Got it. So that argument, while clever, runs into some serious philosophical roadblocks about language and logic itself.
Exactly. For Kant, existence is sort of the stage before you can even talk about predicates.
Okay, so if pure concepts are tricky, where do we go next? The universe itself, maybe?
That's the next big category, cosmological arguments. These reason from the fact that the universe exists at all. They try to trace everything back.
Back to some kind of starting point.
Precisely. To a fundamental, uncaused cause. Thomas Aquinas' second way is probably the most famous. He talks about the order of efficient causes we see everywhere.
Efficient causes, like one thing causing another.
Yeah, like A causes B, B causes C. Aquinas argues this chain of causes can't just go back infinitely. Think of dominoes falling.
Right, the domino analogy.
Even if you have an infinite line of dominoes, you still need something to push the first one, right? A first cause. If there was no first cause, nothing would ever get started.
So there must be something that started it all, but wasn't itself caused by anything earlier?
Exactly. An uncaused cause.
Hmm.
William Lane Craig's Calum cosmological argument is similar, but maybe a bit more direct for modern ears.
How so?
He starts with two premises. One, everything that begins to exist has a cause of its existence. Seems intuitive enough.
Okay.
Two, the universe began to exist.
Hmm.
Modern cosmology, like the Big Bang Theory, seems to support this idea.
Right.
Therefore, the conclusion is the universe has a cause of its existence. Craig then argues this cause must be uncaused, timeless, immaterial, and personal.
So from the universe's existence and maybe its beginning, we get arguments for a first cause. Now, what about looking, not just that it exists, but how it exists, its structure?
Now you're talking about the argument from design or the teleological argument. This one focuses on the universe's apparent order, complexity, how things seem
Yeah. But
right.
this one feels very intuitive, I think. People look at nature and see purpose.
Absolutely. William Paley's watchmaker analogy captures this perfectly. If you're walking and find a complex watch on the ground,
You wouldn't assume it just randomly assembled itself from sand and wind.
right, you'd immediately infer there was a watchmaker, a designer. Paley says, look at the universe biological systems. The laws of physics. They're vastly more complex than any watch.
So, by analogy, we should infer a divine designer.
That's the idea. Though, it's important to note, modern Vurians often steer away from specific biological examples because evolution provides a powerful natural explanation there.
Right, Darwin complicates the simple watch analogy for biology.
Definitely. So the focus shifts more towards the fundamental laws and constants of the universe itself.
Which brings us neatly to the idea of fine-tuning. This argument has gotten a lot of attention.
It really has. It points out that the basic physical constants of the universe, things like the strength of gravity, the electromagnetic force, the mass of subatomic particles.
The fundamental numbers that make physics work.
Exactly. They seem to be incredibly precisely calibrated within a very narrow range that allows for life to exist, if you tweak them even slightly.
No stars, no galaxies, no complex chemistry, no life.
Pretty much. So, proponents argue this looks like the work of a fine-tuner, someone who set the dials just right with staggering intelligence and power. The odds of this happening by chance seem astronomically small.
That does sound compelling. What's the counterargument there? Because there usually is one.
There is, and it's also quite mind-bending. Our sources highlight the many-universes hypothesis, or the multiverse.
Ah, the idea that our universe isn't the only one.
Right. If there's a vast, maybe infinite number of universes, and in each one the physical constants are randomly set.
Then just by probability, some of them would end up with the right numbers for life.
Exactly. It becomes almost inevitable that some universe would be fine-tuned. And of course, we find ourselves in one of those universes because, well, we couldn't exist anywhere else to observe it. It's a kind of selection effect.
So, the fine-tuning isn't special evidence for design, it's just that we could only exist in a universe that looks fine-tuned.
That's the core of the multiverse counterargument. Makes our existence less surprising, perhaps.
Okay, so we've seen some really ingenious attempts to build a rational case for God. Ontological, cosmological design. But philosophy isn't just about building cases, it's also about testing them, right? Let's pivot to the challenges.
Absolutely. And the critiques are just as powerful. David Hume, for instance, really went after the design argument.
What was his main issue?
He pointed out the weakness of the analogy. We know humans design things like watches because we've seen humans designing things. We have experience connecting artifacts to designers.
But we haven't seen anyone design a universe.
Exactly. The universe is unique, vast, and fundamentally unlike a watch or a house. Hume argued our limited human experience just doesn't give us the grounds to infer a perfect, infinite, immaterial designer from an imperfect, finite, material world. The analogy breaks down.
Our experience is too limited for that kind of leap.
That was Hume's point. He was very skeptical about reasoning beyond what we can directly observe.
Okay, that's a powerful critique of design. But maybe the biggest challenge, the one that troubles people most on an emotional level too, is the problem of evil.
Without a doubt. This is often seen as the toughest hurdle for theism. Epicurus framed it ages ago, and it still resonates.
Remind us of that dilemma.
It goes something like, is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he's not all-powerful. Is he able, but not willing? Then he's not perfectly good. Is he both able and willing? Then where does the evil come from?
It seems like you can't have it always an all-good, all-powerful God and the existence of terrible suffering.
That's the core tension. And our sources usually distinguish between two kinds of evil.
Right, there's moral evil.
Suffering caused deliberately by free agents, humans, usually.
All right.
Things like cruelty, murder, war.
And then there's natural evil.
Yeah, suffering from natural events, diseases, earthquakes, floods, animal predation, things not directly caused by human choices.
And often, the free will defense is used for moral evil, right? God allows us free will even if we misuse it, because genuine freedom is a greater good.
That's a common theodicy, yes.
Yeah.
It attempts to justify God allowing moral evil by valuing free choice, but
It doesn't really explain natural evil, does it? What free choice caused a child to get cancer or a tsunami to wipe out a town?
that's the deep difficulty. Natural evil seems, on the surface, gratuitous. It's hard to see a direct link to human freedom or a clear moral purpose, especially for the individual suffering. Can that kind of suffering really fit with a perfectly good and powerful God?
It's a profound challenge.
It is. And even with moral evil, some argue an omnipotent God could have created free beings who always choose the good. Why didn't he?
Is there a response to that?
Well, this is where Alvin Plantinga introduces a really subtle idea: transworld depravity.
Transworld depravity. Sounds intense.
It is, conceptually. The idea is that maybe for some possible free creatures, it's logically impossible for God to create them in any world where they have genuine freedom without them freely choosing evil at least once.
Wait, so it's not that God couldn't stop them, but that creating that specific free person necessarily entails they would, at some point, misuse their freedom?
Sort of. It suggests that the potential for evil might be inherent in certain possibilities of free creation, a possibility even God respects if he grants genuine freedom. It shifts the focus slightly from God's power to the nature of freedom itself.
That's a very complex thought. It tries to reconcile freedom and evil in a deeper way.
It's a sophisticated philosophical move, definitely.
Okay, another puzzle that often comes up regarding God's attributes is the paradox of omnipotence, the classic stone paradox.
Yes. Can an omnipotent being create a stone so heavy that even it cannot lift it?
The ultimate brain teaser. How does it work?
It presents a dilemma. If God can create such a stone, then there's something he can't do: lift the stone.
Yeah.
So he's not omnipotent. But if God cannot create such a stone, then there's something he can't do: create the stone. So he's also not omnipotent. Seems like omnipotence is logically contradictory.
So is omnipotence just incoherent then?
Well, most philosophers and theologians argue this paradox only works against a naive, unrestricted view of omnipotence. It forces a refinement.
A refinement. How?
Our sources suggest redefining omnipotence, maybe as necessarily self-limited in power, sometimes abbreviated on SLP.
NSLP, necessarily self-limited in power. What kind of limits are we talking about? Lack of power.
Not exactly. It's not a limit imposed on God, but limits arising from logical necessity and God's own perfect nature. Think about it. Can God create a square circle?
No, that's logically impossible, a contradiction in terms.
Right, so omnipotence doesn't mean the ability to do the logically impossible. Similarly, can a perfectly good God tell a lie or commit an evil act?
Presumably not, if goodness is essential to his nature.
Exactly. So, the honest love idea suggests God's power is the ability to do anything that is logically possible and consistent with his own perfect nature. Creating a stone he can't lift might fall into the category of logical contradictions, like a married bachelor.
Okay, so omnipotence means power over everything possible, not power to defy logic itself. That makes more sense.
It resolves the paradox for most thinkers.
Now, shifting gears a bit, how does all this philosophical and theological talk intersect with modern science? People often see them as being in conflict.
Yeah, the conflict narrative is popular, but our sources show a much more complex history. For instance, early modern science was often deeply inspired by theistic ideas.
Really? How so?
People like Kepler, Galileo, Newton often saw themselves as studying God's handiwork. They believed the universe was rational and orderly because a rational God created it. Nature was like a divine book to be read alongside Scripture.
So theism actually helped motivate science initially.
In many ways, yes. However, as science advanced, especially in biology, with evolution explaining complex adaptations like the eye or bat sonar,
Things that previously seemed to require a direct designer.
right, those specific God of the gaps arguments became less persuasive. Science provided natural explanations, reducing the need to invoke direct divine intervention for specific phenomena.
So the gaps for God to fill got smaller, scientifically speaking.
In terms of explaining specific mechanisms within nature, yes.
But
But the bigger questions often remain, or even get reframed by science. Modern cosmology, for example, with the Big Bang, suggesting a definite beginning to the universe.
that resonates with the cosmological arguments we talked about, doesn't it? The idea of a first cause.
Absolutely. Science might describe the how of the beginning, but it doesn't necessarily answer the ultimate why. So, while science closes some gaps, it can also open up new avenues for philosophical and theological reflection on existence, fine-tuning, and the nature of reality. The dialogue continues.
Fascinating. And philosophy keeps generating its own puzzles too, right? Like Grimm's paradox about omniscience. What's that one about?
This one gets into some really tricky logic, almost like set theory. It questions whether the concept of knowing all truths is even coherent.
How could it not be?
Well, the paradox suggests that if you could list all truths, forming a set T, then for each truth P and T, there would be another truth. God knows P. Is that truth also in the set T? It potentially leads to an infinite regress or self-referential loops, similar to Russell's paradox about the set of all sets that don't contain themselves. Can there actually be a complete set of all truths?
Okay, my head hurts a little. So how do philosophers try to resolve this?
One idea mentioned in our sources is stratified omniscience. Think about your own knowledge. There's the stuff you're actively thinking about right now, your actual knowledge.
Okay.
And then there's everything else you know but aren't currently thinking about, your stored memories, facts you could recall instantly if needed.
Yeah.
That's your virtual knowledge.
Right. Vastly more.
So, stratified omniscience suggests God's knowledge might be similar. Perhaps God doesn't need to hold every single truth actively in mind simultaneously, which might create paradoxes. Instead, God has perfect, immediate, effortless access to all truth. His virtual knowledge is complete and exhaustive, even if his actual focus isn't on an infinite set at every instant.
So the knowledge is fully available, even if not fully actualized in a paradoxical way. That's clever.
It's one way to think about preserving omniscience without falling into logical traps.
Okay, let's shift one last time from these deep intellectual proofs and paradoxes to something, well, more practical maybe. Pascal's wager.
Ah, yes. Pascal isn't trying to prove God exists here. It's a completely different approach.
It's about making a bet, right?
Exactly. It's a pragmatic argument for why you should choose to believe, even under uncertainty.
Yeah.
Pascal says, look, you have to wager one way or the other. Either God exists or he doesn't. If you bet on God, believe, and you're right, God exists, you gain infinite happiness, eternal bliss, an infinite win. If you bet on God and you're wrong, God doesn't exist, what have you lost? Maybe some finite earthly pleasures, Pascal suggests. A finite loss.
So far, sounds like a good bet. What's the other side?
If you bet against God, don't believe, and you're wrong, God does exist, you lose infinite happiness, maybe face infinite misery, an infinite loss. If you bet against God and you're right, God doesn't exist, you gain. Well, maybe just those finite pleasures you didn't give up, a finite win.
So comparing infinite gain versus infinite loss.
Pascal argues the only rational choice is to bet on God because the potential infinite gain outweighs any finite loss, and the potential infinite loss is too catastrophic to risk for a finite gain.
It turns faith into a kind of cosmic risk management. And our sources mention this even gets into some wild math with infinite values.
Yeah, decision theory struggles with infinities. How do you compare different infinities? Some philosophers and mathematicians try to use things like hyperreal numbers to make formal sense of comparing the infinite stakes in Pascal's wager. It's a really unique crossover.
But it feels a bit calculated, maybe. What are the main criticisms of the wager?
Oh, plenty.
Mm-hmm.
One big one is the many gods problem. Which god are you supposed to bet on? Believing in the Christian God might win you heaven in that system, but what if the actual God is Allah or Vishnu or some god we've never heard of? Betting on the wrong god could still lead to infinite loss.
Right. The wager doesn't tell you which belief system to adopt.
Exactly. Another major issue is the feigned belief problem. Can you actually make yourself sincerely believe something just because it seems like a good bet? Many argue genuine faith can't be manufactured out of self-interest, and maybe a god wouldn't reward that kind of insincere belief anyway.
Yeah, it seems cynical to believe just to cover your bases.
Some find it morally questionable for that reason. It's a fascinating argument, but definitely not without its problems.
Wow. We have really journeyed through some deep waters today. Arguments for God, arguments against, the nature of divine attributes like omnipotence and omniscience, the problem of evil, science, even decision theory.
It's an incredible landscape of thought. And I think what stands out is that there are no simple, universally accepted knockdown answers here. These are questions humanity has grappled with, refined, and debated for millennia.
The intellectual rigor is just immense.
It really is. Exploring these ideas forces us to re-examine our most basic concepts, what power means, what knowledge means, what existence itself means.
So reflecting on this whole deep dive, what really stands out to you, if you had to leave our listeners with one thought?
That's a tough one after covering so much ground.
Yeah.
But maybe think about how our very understanding of possibility underpins all of this.
Possibility.
Yeah. Many arguments rely on distinguishing between what is and what could be. But what if everything that is true is necessarily true? What if there aren't really distinct possible worlds, just this one necessary reality?
Whoa, that would change everything.
It would certainly challenge concepts like free will, contingency, maybe even the idea that things could have been different, or that our existence isn't just a brute necessary fact. It digs right down to the foundations of how we conceive of reality itself. Something to chew on.